All right, turn your Bibles to Philippians chapter 2, verse 1 through 4 tonight. We're still looking at the power of purpose, and tonight it's going to be more specifically the area of being a servant. Jesus said that the greatest people were those who served. Servant is not a popular word in our culture, nor was it a popular word in Jesus' culture. In our society, one would rather at all costs look good than to stoop down and wash feet as Jesus did. Our society wants to have an appearance of looking great, and being a servant doesn't have that appearance. So we have many examples in the Bible. The greatest leaders in the Bible were called servants. Moses, Joshua, David, the prophets were all servants. In the New Testament, we see Peter, Paul, James, Jude, and Jesus were all called servants. The Apostle Paul himself said that he was nothing more than a servant of his Lord. And so he willingly did things he wouldn't have done just as a Pharisee before he became a Christian. So the example for us from the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, is to be a servant and have a servant spirit of serving others. A life of purpose that pleases God is one of servanthood. And so we please God. And in this, being a servant is about relationships. Everything about the Christian life is about relationships. Who cares if we build a building? Who cares if we build some monument somewhere? That doesn't matter. But a soul saved, that makes all the difference in the world for eternity. A soul reclaimed, one drifted that we bring back, that makes a big difference. One that experiences love when they're in despair, it changes a life. It's about relationships. And so that's what being a servant is building relationships. In verse 1, he begins with therefore. We need to look back to see why it's there. And we can go back to verse 27, and it says, only conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. And then when he said, therefore, have the mind of Christ. And so Paul is talking about having the mind of Christ, of being a servant, as he was a servant to his disciples. And there they were talking about who would be the greatest in the kingdom of God, arguing about who would be the greatest, getting mad at each other. And Jesus became a servant and washed their feet. And being a foot washing servant was one of the lowest servants that would have on staff. In chapter 1, Paul wrote about that the church needed to have a steadfast, consistent life, working together in unity. And we learn serving and unity go together. We work together for the plans of God to be achieved. So in chapter 2, verse 1, we learn servants support one another. We live in a world that desperately needs encouragement. I don't know if y'all spend any time on social media or not, but you don't have to spend much time before you realize it's a very negative world on social media. I don't know why, but people just love to criticize and pick and find flaw and anything at all that is negative. That's a cultivated response to life, being negative. You can have the same stimulus or the same post on social media and have a positive response. You can develop a positive response as a habit to where your first thought is something positive. And that's what I'd like to see the church do. When I came here, when we had a gathering and people came in, it'd be in good humor. They want it to be, it was supposed to be funny. Well, look who came in. That's a very negative thing to say. And somebody told me one time, well, that's just you, it bothers. I said, well, it does bother me. But who else does it bother that doesn't say anything about it? They just don't come back. But if we developed an attitude about us and a habit about us where every time somebody came in, we said something positive, said, oh, welcome, come in, good to see you. And make people feel like they're wanted and needed and they're a part. The positive would go a lot further than the negative. And even though people laugh when something negative is said, the hurt goes deep to a lot of people. And that's not what we're about. Paul is writing about that to the church. And we need to be encouraging and positive. A spiritually sensitive servant is one that's quick and alert to needs and quick to meet the needs that are there and in a positive way. Serving Jesus is found in relationships, and it's not what we decide somebody needs. And that's often the case, especially in Baptist churches that I've been a part of. Somebody will have a tragedy or something happen, and the church folk will decide what they need. They don't need it at all. It's not what they want. It's not what they need. But that's all the church can say. And so instead of actually relating to the person and hearing what the person needs to meet a real need, the church just does for them. And oh, we did for that person. And we feel so good about ourselves because we did for that person. And yet we didn't meet a need at all as far as they were concerned. On the other hand, there can be somebody that comes in and you don't know they're having a bad day. Everything in their life looks like it's 100% going wide open good, but they're having a bad day on the inside. They don't say anything, but it's a bad day on the inside. And you greet them in a positive way, and you say something in a positive way, encouraging, and you never know how much it helped them. We've all had people do that to us at some point, and it'd be at the right time they called. At the right time, they were there. At the right time, they said just the right thing that we needed, and it changed our whole attitude toward a situation. We've all been there. That's a servant with a servant mind meeting the needs of others just by being positive and encouraging and lifting them up. Paul said in verse 3, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. I've seen whole congregations divided just because one personality came in and became a dominant personality all about themselves. And then third, servants are about others. In verse 4, he said, do not merely look out for your own interest. We don't always have to have our way. Some people think they just have to always have their way, and if they don't get their way, they get mad and threaten to quit or go home or don't help or what. That's not right. We can have an opinion when we're planning. We can share that opinion as we're planning. And we may do some of the things we want. We may do everything we want sometimes. And sometimes we may do nothing that we think we ought to do. It's just a matter of we work together in a unity. And we're looking out for everybody, not just our own interests. Some people are only looking out. I've been in churches where they did for their families. I noticed one church, we used to have church fellowship in that church, and families would bring a lot of food. And I noticed different families would bring a lot of food, and their family would only eat their food, and that was it. It wasn't a sharing. And they may have known stuff I didn't know. I don't know. But they just all about themselves and not about reaching out to others, bringing others in, and sharing with each other. The goal of the church is fellowship, worship, reaching lost souls, honoring the name of Christ. And it's not about any one of us. It's about Jesus Christ being magnified. As a Christian, we need to train ourselves to be alert to the needs of others, to be aware of their countenance, and say an encouraging word. We don't have to dig them for information and say, well, what's wrong with you? Sometimes they just need an encouraging word. Sometimes they may only need a hug and keep on going. That may be it. But we need to be encouraging one another, and that's a servanthood mindset. We need to be led by Christ, and so that we can meet the real needs of people and not just what makes us feel good. In verse 5, he said, have the same mindset as Christ. And the word have is one that would mean keep on having the mindset of Christ. Have that continually, the mindset of Christ, all the time, wherever you are. So we serve. We give our time. We give our money. And it costs, but we meet the needs of others as we go. We serve to honor Christ. It's not to get recognition for ourselves. It's not to get our own brownie points. We serve Christ. And then fourth, verse 5, servants cooperate with God's plan for their life. What's God's plan for your life? Sadly, there are some people who want to be recognized in church all the time. They want their name to be out there. They want to get awards and honor and their name on plaques and all kind of stuff. That's kind of sad. But there are others, many others, who are very seldom, if ever, recognized. And they do things like they're the doorkeeper. They're always there to open the door and greet people when they come in. The nursery workers, they don't come to a service very often, even though they'd love to, because they have a calling to minister to toddlers and preschoolers and take care of changing diapers, and they back there with the babies, and that's their calling, faithfully, year in, year out. Those that teach a Sunday school class, a child's class particularly, the worst would be the middle school, that 6th through 9th grade area in there. And faithfully, year in, year out. Don't have to be begged to take it back, but they're faithfully serving year in and year out. They don't let distractions take them away. It's not, oh, well, anybody can do this. That's their calling. That's their sense of responsibility, and that's where they fulfill their calling of God. And when it's all said and done, think back on your own church experience growing up. Who was it you remember? It's that person that was there all the time doing the same thing, always welcoming you at the door, always in that Sunday school class, always in that nursery position, always serving in some way or another. It's not the one that served 1 year here and 1 year there, and they might miss if something came up or if something else came up or if they just didn't want to come. The ones you remember were there, rain, shine, sleet, or snow. They were there no matter what. They may be having a bad day, not feeling it, but they're there, faithfully doing what they're called to do. That's servanthood. That's Christian servanthood. And that's the way we need to see it, and we need to be like that. Strive to be like that. And when it's all said and done, it's not for a plaque we get or a trophy or recognition. It's because that's how we give honor to Jesus Christ. That's how we honor Him. It's not about me getting honor. If I get the honor for that, then I don't get a crown from Jesus because I've already gotten my reward here on earth. But if I faithfully serve all year in, year out, good and bad, there's a crown waiting for me in heaven because I did it for Jesus. And we need to serve in that way. Too many serve when it's convenient and when they're applauded, but don't do it for the long haul. The one who remains faithful will be remembered. And when we get to the Lord, He'll say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. In verse 6 through 8, it talks about what Jesus did. He left heaven, all the glory of heaven, His throne of glory in heaven, to come to earth so He could do things like wash feet, listen to criticism, and die on a cross, taking all the sin and shame and guilt of our lives and putting on Him. He left heaven to do that. In verse 9, it tells us the outcome. God exalted Him to the highest place and gave Him a name that's above every name. Let's keep serving. Let's keep serving God. Let's not worry about what happens in this life. Let's keep serving God for His glory, for His honor. And then He'll receive us and say, well done, thy good and faithful servant.